everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5-Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Good morning, Rush Nation. Here we are. It's another Good Morning Fantasy Football. Sorry for the hiatus. I took a little trip away, had a little holiday with my family, and I've come back and feel a bit rejuvenated and fresh, and thought I'd start getting really prepared now and getting everything sharpened for the new season. And so I guess a couple of things I'll just update everyone on to begin with. First of all, the FFCC drafts are now done. They are finished. All 7,776 picks have been made. They are locked in and the rosters are set. So we will see who ends up in the Squid Games at the start of that. Our list of leagues are also nearly full as well. We're at one league left. Tiered PPR is just 8 spots left. If you're interested in that, doesn't matter if you're playing in some of the other leagues. Let's get these full £6.50 donation to Crohn's and Colitis. We're very, very fast approaching £7,000 total raised, which is a phenomenal amount of money, more than we've ever raised before. Thank everybody who is listening, who's been part of all these events to help us raise that money. So we're going to move into training camp. I want to give a bit of thought to every team here, so I'm going to rattle something through on every single team and then highlight some of the key training camp battles to keep an eye on over the next 2 weeks. Preseason effectively starts tonight, and then we're going to have some games now to really start to evaluate where things are on the roster and what we're looking to be seeing over the next sort of 3 weeks, because this is going to be really key in getting this value in drafts. So if we end up on the right side of some of these battles and some of these situations, we're going to be in a really good spot. So I've highlighted sort of 1 or 2 things from every single team first, and then I'll dive into the camp battles. So I'll start. I'm going to do this, I think, in alphabetical order. I think it will just be easier. So they start with the Arizona Cardinals. The 2 things really of note here. It's a pretty shallow team. Kind of know what's going to happen. What I would say here is that Jonathan Gannon said that Kyler Murray feels healthy. He's been lights out. It's the direct quote, lights out there. And as a result, that Murray's actually more involved in some of the leadership stuff. They see him as the future of the franchise. They pay him like that. All that really points to it's kind of not really too much of a update, but what it does mean that he's good to go. He's healthy, which means we should see a more improved Kyler Murray we've perhaps seen over the last couple of years. So the value you're getting him in drafts is very good. I would probably be inclined to start nudging him closer to that Joe Burrow range and getting him there. I think you're going to get good value in return on that as long as he stays healthy. Obviously, we always know about Marvin Harrison Jr. He's going to be the one. A bit of debate on who's going to be the 2. My reckoning is Michael Wilson. That's what we'll keep an eye on. And that James Conner's the lead back. It's kind of everything we kind of need to know. Atlanta Falcons, it looks like that Kirk Cousins is fully cleared and he's fully recovered from that injury. So therefore, he's going to be the starter. There was not really much doubt there. What it does look here is Bijan doesn't look like he's going to have that sort of bell cow role that he's being drafted at. So it looks like Tyler Algier is splitting reps. It'll be interesting to see what happens in these games, how much of a role it seems. But, you know, the way that they're talking up, Zach Robinson has been stating as the offensive coordinator, says that Tyler Algier is going to have a big role. At certain parts of the season, they will be leaning on him, whatever that means. This does throw a bit of caution as to what we should be doing, Bijan Robinson. I'm not saying that we move him out of the top 12, far from that. But what that does mean is it cements my thinking that Breece Hall should be above him. Jonathan Taylor now probably should be above him. And actually, when I publish a revised rankings, which you can get on Patreon, I might move Bijan down to that sort of 4 range now. It's kind of where I feel it could be noise, but all signs are pointing to what we've seen in camp, that Algier is going to have a bigger role. That also means Algier is actually a bit of a steal in drafts right now. And if you're looking for those sort of late round RB hits, then Algier is one that I would putting on your list and started going on there. We also found out yesterday that Rondale Moore is out for the season. That means Ray McLeod is going to be, by default, the wide receiver 3 on this offense. I don't know how much of an impact that necessarily is, but he's going for free. So I imagine in a couple of late drafts, in deeper drafts, he's worth a pickup and seeing what you get there. Just my pace. The Ravens. So Lamar Jackson was out. It sounded like it was a bit of an illness, but he's okay. It looks like Justice Hill is going to be the backup to Derrick Henry. It looks like he's going to have a pretty sizable role. So he looks like a piece you should be targeting. Definitely not Ali in that offense, as people have been. But it looks like Bateman, again, continues to be the steal. He looks like he's going to be the great value wide receiver this year in drafts. He looks like he's going to have a really strong role. He is still effectively going to be the third target in this offense, but that's not a bad thing. But I think it's going to be much closer to Zay Flowers than we like. As a result, I'm almost inclined to probably put a bit of a fade on Flowers, because I think Rashad Bateman is going to be more involved, especially if he's healthy. So there's just a little up and down there just to keep an eye on. But Rashad Bateman, someone I've been talking about for a while on this channel. I think he's someone that I'd be looking to invest in a little bit more as we continue to go through. It's not really much to talk about in Buffalo. It's pretty standard. What I'm saying is Khalil Shakir, as I have been all along, is the guy I want to start the season with, because he's the guy who's going to be the guy at the start. And everything that's come out of training camp, all the noise and the beat reporters saying that he is the go-to receiver right now in this offense. But Keon Coleman will come along, and towards the end of the season, Keon Coleman will likely shine in this. I have this offense being pretty evenly split across the season between Shakir, Samuel, and Coleman, but I think it's going to go in phases. I think Coleman is going to be consistently sort of that third, or that second receiver throughout the season, and I think it's going to tilt heavily on Shakir early and Coleman late, and that's kind of how I see it. So I actually have all three, along with Kincaid, having a pretty similar amount of targets, which is why I'm not as high on Kincaid, because Dawson Knox is going to implement. He is going to interrupt Dalton Kincaid. There is going to be an interruption there, and you're going to see the ceiling collapse on him. So just a little careful there. What we're seeing is, with regard to Jonathan Brooks, it's looking more and more likely he's not going to be playing in September. He might be back for the end of September. He's certainly not going to be there the first couple of weeks of the season, which means that Chuba Hubbard is going to be the guy more than likely. This is one of those camp battles we need to keep an eye on, because this is what's going to dictate the start of the season and maybe the first 6 weeks of the season. So what that basically means is that if you're drafting Jonathan Brooks at his price, you are basically putting him on a shelf until the bye weeks, and then he will kick on. So if you're doing that, that's fine. I've done that. That's my expectation. But that, just make sure you have that expectation, because he's not going to be good to go likely in September. We've got here Caleb Williams. Hasn't looked brilliant. I'm not surprised. I didn't think he was fully ready. So I'm not as surprised with that he's been a bit up and down, and it's one that I would probably say is fair enough. What I would say with that, though, and just staying on that groove, is he will come good, and with all the targets and weapons that he has got, it will be fine. But I wouldn't be concerned. You're going to see some slander on him. I'm not the biggest Caleb Williams man or fan, but I'm not that worried. He'll be fine. Another camp battle I would point out here is this RB2 role. It's actually going to be quite significant here behind DeAndre Swift. So we're looking at Roschon Johnson versus Khalil Herbert. If you're asking me where the chips are falling today, it's going to be Roschon Johnson. I think he's more explosive. I think he's the more talented back. Khalil Herbert's always kind of been there. I've said this for a while now, probably a couple of years, that I think, for me, Roschon Johnson, and in this camp, it's showing that. So this isn't like predestined bias. This camp is showing that Roschon Johnson looks like he's going to get that role, but that's a key battle to really narrow in on. So we've had a couple already that I'm going to talk about near the end of this video, but I would say here that's one that I'd be steering towards. So if you're buying into the backup here, and with Swift's injury record, and I'd be buying into it. I think Roschon Johnson's a good late round bet here. The Bengals, isn't really much info here. I guess the running back position, it looks like it's tearing towards Chase Brown being the guy. I don't really care, because I don't think, as we see, they had Joe Mixon be a fairly, I want to say mediocre in quotes, because he was obviously above average, but his fantasy performance was slightly above average, but it wasn't outstanding. It wasn't anything great the last 2 years. He had flashes, he had games, but we know it's a pass forward offense, and we know it's a pass first offense. So we know that whoever has this role, it doesn't actually matter. So Chase Brown is probably an okay value, but don't sit here and expect him to be an RB1. There is no RB1 in this offense, regardless of whether it's Zach Moss or Chase Brown. You're looking at a low-end RB2 at best, and they're going to flip-flop through the season. But it does look like it's going to start Chase Brown. So if you took your punts on Zach Moss, you probably overpaid, but it might work out as the season goes along, but it won't be to start. What I would say is that all this hype on Cincinnati with their rookie wide receiver, the guy I've been taking is I can't ever pronounce his name, Iosivas, and I've butchered that, and I know, but Iosivas is the guy, or Osivas, or however you pronounce it, is the guy I'm taking. He is basically free. He's going to start the season. He made some great plays down the stretch. I'd be more than happy to just sprinkle him as a late round dart throw to get some nice production in this offense. And I think especially with T. Higgins not being in contract, looking like he's going to go, there's two schools of thought. T. Higgins can go and shoot the lights out because he's going to go and play for a huge deal, or T. Higgins holds within himself because he doesn't want to get injured, because he doesn't want to jeopardize that big deal. And if that costs him a couple of million, but it still nets him a huge payday. And I'm kind of inclined to think that is more the school of thought, that he'll be playing at like 95% instead of that 105%. People think he's going to go for a career year because of the fact that he's looking for a payday. We saw that with Dak. We saw that with other players where they went for those big years and then got injured. And it cost them money. So keep an eye on that. The Browns, we probably aren't going to see Deshaun Watson play preseason. That shouldn't be a worry. He's got this shoulder injury, but he's doing well. So I wouldn't worry about it. I wouldn't be panicked about Deshaun Watson. You're going to see some things that he's not going to play in preseason. It's just Deshaun Watson. He's playing in the league a long time. Now, take the personal out of it. I get it. Some people don't want to draft him because of the incidents and everything else. And that's fine. How you play fantasy football is how you play fantasy football. I'm not here to judge. But just from the sheer facts of he has been a professional in the league for a long time, he doesn't need to play preseason. So it's not a big deal if he does not play preseason. I think what you're going to see is that you're probably going to see Nick Chubb at the end of preseason, or you might not see him at all. All these running backs are banged up. Foreman's banged up. Ford's banged up. They're all banged up. So ultimately, I think they're going to take a lot of running backs into the season, and it is going to be a bit of a messy situation. Ultimately, the only two you really want to buy in on are Chubb and Ford. I think Chubb's price is phenomenal. I think you can grab Chubb in like the 8th or 9th round of drafts, and that's a phenomenal price to pay for a guy who could produce an RB1 season. Probably not going to happen, but if he gets to a high RB2 season, which is well within his range of outcomes, and he stays healthy, yeah, I'm all in on that. And I think he's going to produce some elite performances right in the middle, especially those bye week covers and all the way through to the end of the season. I'm buying in on Nick Chubb. I think he's at a really, really good price, a really attractive price compared to everyone else you're going to get in that range. That's one I'd be looking at. I think you're going to see David Njoku really pop this year. And the argument I've had from people when they've seen my rankings is Njoku's too high because what he did it with Joe Flacco. Well, actually, he's put a lot of performance in with Mike Vrabel, and they are going to get really, really good. Like, they're going to get really good. Like, Njoku is going to be a elite option in this offense. So I think you can get Njoku at a good price. He's probably going off the board like tight end 8. I really think he's going to finish inside the top 6, maybe even the top 5. One of the key battles we're seeing here is this running back situation in Dallas. Now, Ezekiel Elliott is sort of primed to be the starter. He's looked awful. Like, he's looked terrible. He doesn't look good. He hasn't looked sharp. He hasn't looked quick. He hasn't looked good from anything I've seen. Now, granted, I haven't watched every snap of Dallas Cowboys practice. No, I don't think anyone has, other than maybe the coaches. But from what I have seen, what's been publicly available, it hasn't looked great. The beat writers don't look good. I spoke to a couple of Cowboys friends of mine who are really ingrained in this stuff, and they all say that he hasn't looked good. The guy who actually probably looks the best so far is Royce Freeman. And it's looking more and more likely that this is going to be a 3-man committee between Elliott, Dowdle, and Freeman. But it looks like Freeman is actually going to be a guy who's going to get a considerable amount of work here. So he's going for absolute free. So I'm fading Elliott at all costs. If there is a real scenario that Elliott falls out of this committee and it's a Dowdle and Freeman committee. But it's looking more and more likely like Freeman might be the staple hold of this. Now, none of them are going to get excessive volume. None of them are going to be particularly high volume, but they're really interesting ones to watch out for. It's a key battle to keep an eye on. CeeDee Lamb is continuing to hold out. I expect that situation to resolve, so I'm not too worried about it. Brandon Cooks has looked good in the interim, and that might earn him a really nice role in this roster as he's playing that way into it. The Broncos. I mean, what do we do about the Broncos? All this nonsense that Javonte Williams is going to get cut, it's absolute nonsense. He is going to be the lead back on this roster. It's more about who's going to be behind him. But I think you're seeing... I think what we're seeing here is a bit of a convoluted backfield, as we kind of have done for years, and Sean Payton isn't going to dispel any of that. So I think Williams looks good, but I think he's a low-end RB2. And I think if you want to hedge on a McLaughlin or a P. Ryan, I think they're at good prices to take little punts at this in case Williams goes down. Then I'd be inclined to pick up one of those guys and look at them as a stash. But don't expect too much, and especially don't expect too much too soon. But what we're seeing is that Cortland Sutton is the guy, and his price is an absolute bargainous price. They're working on a deal. I expect that deal to get done, and I expect Sutton to stay. So Sutton is going to be an absolute target monster, and the price he's going in drafts because of this uncertainty, when that deal gets done, he will shoot 2, maybe 3 rounds, because the guys behind him, Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims, they're not really have established themselves as viable options on every down. So I think you're going to see a lot of rotation there on the receiving side. And I think the only one you're really going to see produce is Cortland Sutton. So I think you're going to see there. And that also means that Greg Dulcich is a massive value, because I'm looking at people that are going to be on the field more often than not. And it looks like it's going to be Greg Dulcich and Cortland Sutton. And that, for me, says that Greg Dulcich has a good chance to break into a top 10 fantasy finish. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm not predicting that's going to happen. But there's a situation here that, if it all aligned, can happen. And I'm willing to steer on that. And you're getting him at a tight end 3 price. I'm buying him as the backup if I'm in a league where I need to buy a backup. If I'm not going with that elite tight end option, I'm going with 2 later tight end options, and that's what I'm doing there. Right, Detroit Lions. Not really much to say that Jameson Williams looks incredible, right? He really is starting. Everyone's talking about the Jameson Williams breakout. The coaches are talking about it. The beat writers are talking about it. everyone's pointing to this. I think this is finally the year that this is likely to happen. Again, his price is too cheap. And the way that to evaluate this is the way that you can pick him up in like the 10th or 11th round. If it happens and you get a Jameson Williams bump and he breaks out and he's great, you've got an absolute steal. If he doesn't, you cut him and you get bye week cover. It's so minimal risk to buy into this, and you might go, that's just hype, that's just trope. Fine. But it's such a low price to pay for the hype that I'm in. I'll buy it because it's so cheap. Like, if it doesn't fall and it doesn't happen, and we've been duped, I'm paying the 10th, 11th round price on it all day long. Like, that's replacement fodder. That's a bench spot on your roster, not even a starting spot is where you're picking that player. I'll take the punt. I'll replace him. There's plenty of guys in the waiver wire you can replace with. It's not a high price. If he was a 6th round pick, that's a different matter. That's one you have to be a bit cautious on. Green Bay Packers, look, they've locked up Jordan Love, so we know what's going on there. The key battle here is who's going to be the 2. Is it going to be Dylan or is it going to be Lloyd? I'm thinking like it's going to start Dylan, but it will move to Lloyd. So I think it will start with Dylan as the backup, and then I think Marshawn Lloyd comes through by the midpoint, maybe bye week, maybe end of season. So what I mean by that is I'm not really in on Dylan unless Josh Jacobs goes down, which he never really has had a big injury in his career. So I'm okay on this. So I'm in on Jacobs. I think he's going to be a good option. He's decently priced for what he does. And then I'm in on Lloyd. I'm out on Dylan. I just don't see that working out. And if I was buying shares on Lloyd, you would have to be patient because probably those first 6-7 weeks, you're not going to see a lot out of it. So you're going to have to be a patient hold. And that in a shallow bench league is probably too much for you. But in a deeper bench league, it's well worth trying that one. This wide receiver room is weird. I don't think anyone really comes out. I don't think anyone really comes out with this. You're going to hear loads of things that Dubs has been incredible, and that's fine. But they share it around so much. It's kind of, they're like the Premier League equivalent of Arsenal, right? Where they don't have an out-and-out alpha. They just have a lot of guys who will contribute to the overall goal. And I think that's how you need to view this offense from wide receiver. I think they've got 3 wide receiver 3s in fantasy. You might get one of those shade into the top 24, but I don't really see it. Instead, I think you've got 3 wide receiver 3s. And so none of them need to be overpaid for. Jaden Reed doesn't need to be overpaid for. His touchdown rate was far too over efficient last year. None of these guys need to be overpaid for. If you get them at a good price, absolutely fine. But just be careful. You're buying wide receiver 3s with some upside. That's what I want you to walk into that with. The Texans, we haven't seen Joe Mixon yet, so we don't know what it's like. He's got a hamstring injury. That does sort of quell a little bit. His price has been going like that and that. He's been talked through the roof. Just be a little bit careful of that. But what I will say is that Noah Brown and Xavier Hutchinson look really good. They have done. And you'll see this in the preseason games. Those 2 look particularly good. And so as a result, we're looking like when we're sitting there thinking about who's going to be like the guys on this offense, Stephon Diggs is overpriced. I know they got Tank Dell, who I think will be really good this season. And you've got Nico Collins who's been paid as a 1. But I would expect Noah Brown to particularly make some impacts in games. So he's going for free. Buy in on that. He's a good late round prospect to just have a sleeper on and keep an eye on. The Colts. We've got here Anthony Richardson's looked great, especially on the ground. He's looked phenomenal. Jonathan Taylor's fully healthy. He's looking great. And Michael Pittman has looked absolutely brilliant. Josh Downs has also looked really good. So what that means for AD Mitchell is AD Mitchell's kind of coming along really slow. He's a very raw prospect. So you're going to hear some talk about him maybe sort of being on special teams, which is fine, to cut his teeth in. I think he comes along later on in the season. For me, this is a pretty narrow tree. I want Richardson, Taylor, Pittman. I'm really not like Josh Downs as a sprinkle is fine, but I'm not expecting to see high volume out of him because I think Richardson's going to make the plays with his legs. So I think there's some options for Downs, and I think he could be a sort of wide receiver 3 contributor and a flex play, but I don't think you're going to see lots of ceiling weeks out of him unless something happens to Michael Pittman. But if you want to buy that insurance, Josh Downs' price is really good right now, so I don't mind having a sprinkle of him. But, I thought AD Mitchell would be walking into a situation where he could take that sort of hybrid slot role to really get accustomed to the NFL. He's not really earned that spot, so I'm kind of out on AD Mitchell for 2024. I do think he can bring along late, and he's someone I'll star for my waiver wire pickups, but he's not someone I'm immediately trying to buy in on. Jacksonville, it's pretty interesting. Again, they're quite a narrow tree. We know ETN's going to get a lot of work. They talk about they're going to streamline his work a little bit, which isn't a bad thing because I think he was overworked last year, which is why his efficiency took an absolute nosedive. But I think he's going to have a pretty solid role that's going to be as close to a bell cow as you kind of need. Trevor Lawrence is obviously the guy. And then you've got here Christian Kirk, who's looked great. And then I think you're going to see Gabe Davis have his up and down weeks. And I think you're going to see Brian Thomas do bits and pieces, and Evan Ingram will be a target hog. It's a pretty simple offense. Nothing has really changed. There's nothing really electric other than Brian Thomas looks ready for the NFL, which is good because he has had moments, I think, where he struggled, and I think he's starting to really come through the other side of that. So all this is really saying is that we know what the Jags is. It's just what's Davis's upside and downside weeks. And so you kind of got this Gabe Davis up and down, like boom or bust, and then you've got Brian Thomas will be a really consistent wide receiver, but it doesn't look like it's a huge ceiling for him. So that's just my caution for what we're seeing so far. The Chiefs, again, we know pretty much everything that there is to know about that. We know Mahomes, we know Pacheco. I don't think Pacheco is going to have quite the same strength that he had last year in terms of targets in terms of carries. I think they're going to strip that role back a little bit because there is more target competition in the air. There's more people to pass to. So I think that role's going to come back a little bit, and it's just going to quell him into that sort of lower end RB2 level. So I think he's going overdrafted right now. Give me Rashad White over him any day of the week and twice on Sundays. I think you've got here this interesting target range of Brown, Worthy, Rice. We don't know what's happening. Rice, I think, it's more than likely he gets suspended, but we still are waiting on that. And then you've got Kelsey. So you're basically picking a guy, and that's what this preseason will be. It's a big preseason battle. Who's going to be the guy? If I had to lay the money today, I would say it's Rashee Rice until there's a suspension. If there's a suspension, I'll then lay the money on the Hollywood Brown. I think Xavier Worthy is a red flag. I think and the preseason games will tell us a lot more, but it's really hard to call it. Anyone that's going out there telling you this is the guy and this is why is really only doing that with a guess or a prediction. The beat writers have got no fact on it. No one's got any fact on it. It is pretty much a case of Mahomes is bringing them along. He's talking them up. He's talked Worthy up. He's talked Hollywood Brown up. Rice is a bit of a dicey situation as it is, but I look at Rice as the incumbent and what he has done, and as long as his suspension doesn't happen, he is the guy that you've got to usurp. And when we haven't got a concrete, this is the guy, I always lean to the incumbent because the incumbent's there. He's been there. He's done it. These guys aren't. That's the difference. The Raiders, again, we've got a quarterback battle here. So who's going to actually start the season as quarterback? It's probably going to be Gardner Minshew. I like the fact that the Raiders are doing a open competition, and they really like Aiden O'Connell. And I actually think Aiden O'Connell finishes the season as the starting quarterback, but I think Gardner Minshew starts it. I think that Aiden O'Connell just needs a bit more refinement and development. I think there's something in there, but I don't know if it's good enough. But I think they will play the season out with him because he is more the future of the franchise than Gardner Minshew. So I think that's where I think you're going to see them go to Aiden O'Connell if they don't go there to start with. So it's a quarterback situation you don't want to be part of. Even in Superflex, like you don't really want part of it because it's literally I got it in my rankings at like 55-45 or 60-40. Like that's how I see the playing time. It's not one I really want part of. Dylan Laub's been good, so he's going to be the backup running back here. Brock Bowers has been great, but we know what this is. This is Jacoby Myers. This is Devontae Adams. The running back situation really hasn't had a lot of talk. I say the backup Dylan Laub, by the way. It's Mattison's the backup I meant. So there's a change of pace back is what I meant. So everyone's thinking that Xavier White is going to be like the every down back, and it's on Madison to make sure that doesn't happen. So I don't see that happening. So I think you're going to see White have like 60% role, Mattson a 30% role, and Laub will get the other 10. If I had to break it down in raw percentages, that's kind of what I see. But I could also see that going slightly more Mattison than White. White's not an every down guy. I just don't see it. So a bit careful there. What have we got? Justin Herbert for the Chargers. He's injured, but he should be back for week 1. Again, doesn't need preseason. He's been around a while. Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins are sharing reps. This is what they did in Baltimore. They know each other. They're used to it. You'll see them as effectively a 1A, 1B. I think Gus Edwards probably gets the nod, given that he is the guy and he's more healthy and more durable and more reliable. But I think, again, this is a sort of 60-40 backfield. Lad McConkey got injured, and that's a real shame because I actually thought he had this opportunity to be the wide receiver 1. And he could still be, but I think that's going to help hurt the development. So I'm going to incline to think that Palmer will be the wide receiver 1 on this team. I think Chark is going to get some nice playing time early in the season. I think that could be a nice steady wide receiver 4 role. But then I think you're going to see McConkey come through mid-season and beyond once we've kind of got this sort of everything worked out and he's got that relationship going. So, with no Herbert and no McConkey now for the short term, that development stalls. So again, I lean to the incumbent. The incumbent here is Palmer. Quentin Johnston, I think, is just done. I just don't think you're going to see him. He's not relevant. If you're taking him in drafts, you can throw that pick away. It's literally not going to happen for you. The Rams, it's all about Kyron Williams. Kyron Williams is going to be the guy. Everyone is sitting here saying Blake Corum is going to take a huge part of this. He's just not. And all the McVay talk, I think it's all trying to steer into that. It's all Kyron Williams. That's how I see it. Everything I've seen, everything I've heard is all pointing towards Kyron Williams. We've got Puka Nakua's knee injury. That does put him week to week. So it just puts DeMarcus Robinson in a really strong position. Again, he is free in drafts. He can smash it early. He can smash it in the middle. And with Cooper Kupp there, I think it's all looking good for that situation. It's pretty narrow, pretty predictable, but I'd say buy in on Kyron Williams. His price is phenomenal. Buy in on DeMarcus Robinson. His price is phenomenal. Buy in Cooper Kupp. His price is phenomenal. Fade Nakua slightly because this injury could be one of those niggling. With a knee injury, as much as it's not serious, it could be one that plagues through the season. So at a price, he's probably a fade. Right. Dolphins have signed Hill and Tua to long-term deals. Again, we kind of know what's happening here. We're getting a lot of news that Mostert's going to be the starting running back and Achane is getting a lot of praise. This is going to be a role that Mostert starts and Achane finishes. I think that's how we're seeing it if Achane stays healthy. So Achane, I think both prices are phenomenal because I think Mostert is an absolute steal because he'll start the season really, really strong and you're getting him in the 8th, 9th round. So phenomenal value on there, but that will taper off and then Achane will take over. And I think there's a role for both of them. But I do think as the season goes on, I think Mostert will take the hit. So I like the price to get you through the bye weeks, but then I think as a championship contender, he falls off. Whereas I think Achane starts slow, but has a nice steady role and it increases through the season. And he could be a potential league winner for you come the end of the season. I don't care about the tight ends in this world, nor do I care about wide receivers that aren't named Jalen Waddle or Tyreek Hill. So nothing to worry about there. The Vikings, it looks like Sam Darnold will start. Again, not a shock. I think he plays 4 games, maybe less, and then it will all go to JJ. We know what we're getting with Sam Darnold, but to draft a guy that high, he's not going to sit that long. That's my feeling. The guy I would keep an eye on as a name for a sleeper here is Jalen Naylor. He's looked phenomenal in camp. He's looked really, really good. And I think, considering that there's a chance that Jordan Addison gets banned for this DUI or DWI, let's get it right. I think Jalen Naylor really has an opportunity to shine through. So he's free in drafts. You can pick him up for nothing. And I think there's a real opportunity that he comes through and breaks for you. So I would be buying in on him as a sleeper as a late round to the dart throw and get in on that. Aaron Jones has looked good. I think he's going to be fine. And again, at a good price. The team haven't really commented. I don't know why. It could be anything. It could be a motivational thing. It could be anything, but he looks hungry. He looks good. So I think that will happen to be where it is. So I'm not worried about Aaron Jones, but I think you can start with Sam Darnold to keep an eye on. The Patriots, what do we got here? I think we're seeing Jacoby Brissett will start. Drake May will take over. Ramondre Stevenson will be the lead back. Gibson will be the second back. And then you got all the wide receivers. It's so crowded that it hasn't shaken out. We'll need the games to see how it goes. So ultimately, what that really means is that DeMarco Douglas is the guy, I think. But again, I see a ceiling at like 760 yards. I just don't think he's going to get more than that. So I kind of not in on any of them. Hunter Henry looks good, though. So as a tight end, late tight end dart throw, Hunter Henry, there's definitely a good case for him for all of those touchdowns that he'll get you in the red zone. The Saints, Kamara's look really good. He looks hungry, he looks ready to go. And don't forget, he missed the start of last season. So this is really good to see. He put on an elite finish. So again, you're looking at a really star-studded running back at a phenomenal price. And I've said this all off season. I don't think anything changes. So I think he's going to be in a really good spot. A.T. Perry has looked pretty poor. And I think that they're desperate for him to come through, but it hasn't happened. So that could throw a bit of turbulence in what they want to do. So he's kind of one to keep an eye on, but if he doesn't shine in these preseason games, who knows what they do at that situation. But A.T. Perry's one to keep an eye on, but he's not looked good. Maybe he needs the games to get going. I would say that if you're looking for a tight end, Foster Moreau, because he's worked with Derek Carr asked for him to be signed. If you're looking for an early season tight end, let's say you've taken like TJ Hawkinson or someone that you're hoping they come through like late in the season, then Foster Moreau might be a decent sort of starting bet. I've always liked him as like a touchdown or bust guy. So if you're looking for a touchdown guy, he could do it for you. I haven't watched Hard Knocks yet for the Giants. I will do. But I haven't watched all of that yet. So I need to catch up. What I would say from what I have heard and seen is that Neighbors has looked really good and he looks like he's going to be really strong. That Theo Johnson is going to be more than likely the tight end one. The chart says it's probably Bellinger at this moment, but I think Theo Johnson gets that role. The team know what they've got in Bellinger and yet drafted Theo Johnson anyway. So I think Theo Johnson is the incumbent, or not the incumbent, but he's the one that's got the favor of the coaching staff and everybody else. So I fancy him to take that role. Devin Singletary, he's going to be the one who knows Brian DeBall. They've worked together before in Buffalo. DeBall's brought him in. Whether or not that's a strong enough role to be hugely like fancy relevant, like top 20, I'm not sure, but there's one to keep an eye on. The Jets, Brain Allen looks like he's going to be the backup. There's a bit of a battle there, but it looks like he'll be the backup to Breece Hall. Garrett Wilson's looked good. The chemistry between him and Aaron Rodgers looks good. Mike Williams is ahead of schedule, so I expect him to probably come along quite well. But there's not really much in the Jets camp. Again, pretty narrow tree. We know what we're getting with all those pieces there. And the same can be said with the Eagles. They've got Kellen Moore, which definitely makes them far more interesting. But it looks like, and for what Kellen Moore's saying, that he's going to use Kenneth Gainwell, Will Shipley to alongside Saquon Barkley, which is what I've been saying all along. I've been saying this for months, that I think Barkley's price is well overpriced. And Kellen Moore is telling you that this is the Philly way. This is what they do. This is what they've always done. They play all three running backs, and they will dilute that role a little bit. But the key point is that Dallas Goedert has been a huge part of this passing attack in reps and what we've seen. He will be. I have him overranked than the consensus, and it's good to see that belief is starting to come through from what I'm seeing there. But again, narrow tree, we know what's going on there. But I'd say Goddard is arrow up. I'd say Barkley arrow down. The Steelers, it's looking like with Wilson out that Fields is taking advantage. I still think Wilson starts week 1. I think they'll go with a tried and tested experience. But we'll wait and see how that goes. Roman Wilson got injured, but he's on track to get back. But that will obviously hinder his early season performance. But I think Ayuk ends up there. So my feeling is that Ayuk becomes a Steeler, and this changes it. And we're kind of waiting for that to happen. And until that does happen, we're all in a bit of flux waiting for it to happen. So I would say this tree is, again, very narrow. I still think Jaylen Warren outperforms Najee Harris. And I think that's what we're waiting to see. But there's a camp battle here. I think Wilson will probably get the nod. Fields is doing everything he can to get ahead of that. But I'd say that it's going to be, and I think if Fields comes in, then I'm downgrading everyone in this offense from a passing perspective, because a 50% completion rate is not going to get it done. But really, what that tells me is that George Pickens is a very influx price right now. People will be buying him because he's the only target. But I like Pat Freiermuth, and I like Jaylen Warren in this offense. And that's probably the two I'd be anchoring in. The rest I'm a bit more cagey on. 49ers, I think Ayuk goes. I think he goes to the Steelers. I think they get a second and a fifth. I've been saying this all offseason. You don't just let a commodity go for nothing and bite your hand off, spite your face. A second and a fifth is a good deal. I think they'll get that. Ricky Pearsall has looked really good. So again, I think that will make the decision for him to go easier. It's noise of they need to bring a wide receiver in. They just signed Chosen Anderson, who was formerly Robbie Anderson, who was formerly Robbie Chosen, and he's had more name changes than Prince, so it's hard to tell. But what I will say is, by that move, that's telling me that it's going to be a pick-only move. They're not going to bring in another wide receiver. They don't need to. I think you're going to see Ricky Pearsall be a good late-round value, but I think it's going to be all Deebo Samuel. And if you'd listened to me at the start of the summer, I've been telling you to buy Deebo Samuel, draft Deebo Samuel. He's very underpriced. He's still massively underpriced. Get in on Deebo Samuel, and hopefully now everyone has listened and it's jumped in, because I've got loads of Deebo Samuel. I'm all over him. Seahawks, not much to say. That other than Noah Fant looks great. He's the biggest tight end value for me outside of Greg Dulcich, or even with Greg Dulcich. I think he's going to own the tight end role. I think he's got a legitimate shot to be a top 12 tight end this year, Noah Fant. So again, if you like these late round tight ends, Dulcich and Fant seem to be two of those guys that you can really invest in quite a good way. JSN's look good, so I think that's fine. We kind of haven't seen anything different other than the coach. Mike McDonald has said that Kenneth Walker, quote unquote, needs to be fed and can be special. Kind of knew that, right? But I still think they're going to cap him a little bit with Zach Charbonnet, but I still think he's going to get more work than he did. So that will elevate him into a top 12 running back, and that's kind of what we expect. So nothing too different out of Seattle. But what I will say is Noah Fant is a good sleeper there. The Bucks haven't got much left really to say on the Bucks. Again, really narrow. I've been saying all along that I think Chris Godwin's going into the slot, and he'll get a lot more targets. He'll get a lot more performance out there. So I think he's going to be in a really good spot. I think you're going to have him there. I think you're going to have White be the main running back. I think you're going to get Bucky Irving get a little bit of sort of individual touches, but I don't know how sustainable that's going to be for fantasy. Mike Evans will be probably a slight downturn from last year, but you can write and pen 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns he's going to get. Baker Mayfield will be good. What I will say is Cade Otton will be perhaps more of a factor this year than he was last year, as we've seen before in the Liam Cohen offenses. Nearly there, 2 more. The Titans. Will Levis has looked quite good. They've called Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears as the co-running back ones. That's an interesting way of saying that they're equal. I don't believe there's such thing as equal. It doesn't matter who the starter is, by the way. They can only name one starter. I think that trends to me that Tajay Spears is going to end up ahead of Tony Pollard. If they're coming in, they find Pollard to all that money and they're calling him equal, that says that Tajay Spears is ahead and they're trying to save face to the front office. That's what that tells me from experience. So I go with Tajay Spears. Tajay Spears is the guy. That's fine. I don't want Pollard. I'll take Tajay Spears at price. I think he's going to be good value for it later on in the season. DeAndre Hopkins is out for 4 to 6 weeks, so this is an opportunity for Treylon Burks to not just make the roster but make an impact. I don't care. There isn't enough work in this offense to sustain 3 wide receivers. So people are going to draft Burks. Let people do that. If Hopkins is out for 4 to 6 weeks, he'll be back mid-September at worst. Fine. Burks can have 2 games as a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 in fantasy football. And then what? Hopkins comes back. Ridley comes back. Tajay Spears in the backfield. Burks is 4th in a heavy run offense. I'm out. It doesn't. Don't. I mean, you can waste the pick and see what happens. You can go, yeah, well, opportunity, blah, 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 blah. Trevor Burks hasn't done it for a couple of years. He's not going to do it this year. They went and got Calvin Ridley. Tells you everything you need to know. So I'm just not in on him at all. And then the Commanders. So they haven't actually named Jaden Daniels as a starter, but that will happen because why wouldn't it? Brian Robinson, as I've told you all along, is going to be the starter here. So he will start and will be the guy. And then the Titans situation, I think it's going to start as Ertz and it will go to Sinnott. Terry McLaurin's looked good. Luke McCaffrey has looked quite decent as well. He could potentially be the slot receiver in this team. So he's a good late round throw in PPR leagues and standard leagues. So I would leave that well alone because I don't think the volume's there from a yardage perspective, but he could get a nice sprinkle of targets as a slot receiver there. So for me, this offense is pretty predictable. I'm fading Eckler at cost. It's just not enough there for me. But Brian Robinson is the guy I'd be embracing at the running back position. And then McLaurin as a sprinkle. He's a good price. I don't mind it. Jaden Daniels, I think, is going to be one of those guys that will break into the top 12 in the fantasy football rank because of what he can do with his legs. But Luke McCaffrey, if you want a PPR slot guy as a late round, I don't hate it. I think that's pretty decent sleeper pick for you. And then I'll just go through, in case I missed any of the camp battles. So we've talked about the running back situations. Chuba Hubbard versus Miles Sanders, probably one I missed because I think that's going to go to Chuba Hubbard. I think that's pretty clear. Miles Sanders should not be drafted. He's not really a thing. There is this Elijah Mitchell versus Jordan Mason. I think it's going to go Elijah Mitchell again. I always tend to lean with the incumbents. That's what the situation was last year. I don't think anything has changed this year to change that thinking. We do have a Colby Parkinson versus Davis Allen. They paid all that money to Colby Parkinson, so I can't see them bending on that straight away. But it could be interesting to see what happens before Higbee comes back there. There is some talk about De'Ami Brown and Jamison Crowder getting in ahead of Luke McCaffrey. I don't see it. I think Luke McCaffrey's going to get that slot role. Good one for the Panthers is Leggett versus Jonathan Mingo. I actually don't know. I haven't seen enough to point this one way or the other. But this crew drafted Leggett and they didn't draft Mingo. So that'll be interesting to see what happens. A.T. Perry, I mentioned, not really. I think the team want him to have that role, but it hasn't quite happened yet. So Cedric Wilson could be one to watch as a late round pick. And then just seeing if I've missed anything here. No, I think we've got most of it. The Jets, the sort of second or third receiver, Alan Lazard, Malachi Cloy, or Xavier Gibson. I think it'll be Gibson, but actually I don't care. It's not going to be a relevant role. But that was the last one I wrote down. So that's everything I've got here. Should be really, really interesting to see what happens. And that's the camp battles. That's a little bit from each team that I've seen, but this week will change all the tail of the tape. So keep an eye for my updated rankings, which will hopefully go up later on today on the Patreon. If you haven't subscribed yet, you can subscribe at www.patreon.com/5yardrush. Really cheap. Cheapest tiers are £1 a month, and you'll get access to that and access to the WhatsApp chat and everything else. And there's projections with customized scoring for your league. And then if they've got anything quirky, I'll do that on the side for you as well. So lots of interesting tools that you can take advantage of on the Patreon. But that's going to do it for this one. It's much longer today, but I've been away for a while, and I'm not sure if we'll do a flagship show this week. Stocks is a bit busy, hasn't coincided well with the holiday, but if I can try and get one in, I will try, but no promises. So I kind of want this to be sort of a staple between the two. I'll be back next week with more morning shows, and we'll get back into the swing of things. But thank you as always, Rush Nation, for everything. I hope you've enjoyed today's show. Lots of content and things to go through, so you might need to listen to this twice. But please do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please do watch these videos. I hope you find them useful. And until next time, Rush Nation, don't forget, as always, keep rushing.